Good morning. We've already formed a quorum. I now call the meeting to order. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of the minutes of meeting. The minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of February has already been distributed to members. The Secretariat has not received any proposal for amendment. If members have no comments on the minutes, I would like to invite them to confirm the minutes. All right. Next, information papers issued since the last meeting. The Secretariat has distributed a number of papers, the titles of which have already been set out on the agenda. Next, items for discussion at the next meeting. The next regular meeting will be held on the 22nd of July, Monday. The administration has proposed 4 items for discussion. First, follow-up work on the latest situation on the report in relation to the Lamma Island collision incident on the 1st of October 2012. Number 2, latest progress in the reform of the new regulatory regime for the tourism sector in Hong Kong, and then arrangements to regulate the use of the Kai Tak cruise terminal. The 4th proposed is the protection of the interest of consumers using telecommunication services. As there are relatively many items for the next meeting, I'd like to suggest that we advance the starting time of that meeting from 10:45 a.m. to 9 a.m. Any comment? 4 items. Well, in your paper, only 3 are set out. Which 4? Well, let me repeat. The latest situation of the follow-up work on the Lamma collision incident. All right. No collision today? Well, everybody wins if the boat sinks. Do you understand? All right, next item on the agenda, incorporation of in the local legislation, the latest standards of the International Maritime Organization on vessel emissions. In attendance today we have Ms. Jenny Chan, Principal Assistant Secretary for Transport and Housing, and Mr. Kelly, Assistant Secretary for Transport and Housing. We also have from the Marine Department Mr. Chik King Fai, Assistant Director of Marine, and Mr. Jimmy Leung, Chief of the Maritime Policy of the Marine Department, and also Mr. Leung Wing Fai, General Manager for Local Vessel Safety, also from the Marine Department. Ms. Chan, would you please take us through the paper? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me briefly introduce the paper to you. The International Maritime Organization has formulated a number of emission standards to guard against air pollution generated by vessels. This is under the International Convention of the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, MARPOL, Annex 6, which is applicable to all jurisdictions. Whenever these emission standards are amended, the Marine Department will, through notices, inform vessels that they must adhere to the new standards. And in accordance with the latest standards, the Marine Department will also monitor ocean-going vessels in Hong Kong, the OGVs, and local vessels. Still, we have to amend local legislation to reflect the latest international standards. So today, we have submitted our proposals on the merchant shipping prevention of air pollution regulation to incorporate the latest standards. First of all, for sulfur oxide standards, we propose to follow Annex 6 of MARPOL. That is to amend the sulfur content level from the existing 4.5% m per square meter to 3.5%. At present, the average is 2.6%, and for local vessels, 0.5%, all lower than the ceilings set by the IMO. And then in the long run, for OGVs, in order to reduce nitrogen oxide emissions for ocean-going vessels built after the 1st of January, they must follow the latest emission standards for engines. Now, these will also be reflected in the proposed new regulation. Besides, our regulation also prohibit the release of ozone depleting substances. So if any equipment is releasing such substances, they must be received in the Qingyi waste disposal plant. In accordance with the latest standards for OGVs above 400 gross tonnage, they must keep a list of ODS containing equipment and keep a register, a record book, to record the mass of ODS discharged. As for VOCs, that is volatile organic compounds, at the moment, there's stipulation that a tanker registered in Hong Kong must have on board a system for the collection of VOCs and must use such a system during the loading of relevant cargoes in a designated port or terminal which is subject to the VOC requirements of Annex 6. We would like to follow the standards adopted by IMO by requiring all tankers that carry crude oil to have on board and implement a VOC management plan, which has to be approved by the Marine Department. This is to record suitable procedures for minimizing VOC emissions. As for shipboard incineration, at the moment our laws prohibit incineration on board, and incineration on board must be done in specified equipment. We propose to further prohibit the incineration of sewage sludge and sludge oil not generated on board the ship and the residues from exhaust gas cleaning systems. And then to control the emission of greenhouse gas, under Annex 6, a new chapter is included to regulate the energy efficiency of OGVs of 400 gross tonnage and above. We propose to adopt the convention to specify the minimum energy efficiency level for different types of OGVs according to their dates of construction or major conversion. And all vessels have to keep a register to record the fuel efficiency of the operating vessel. The industry agrees to these proposed amendments to reflect the latest international standards. With members' consent, in 2013-14, we'll introduce the piece of legislation to LegCo for scrutiny. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, Dr. Fernando Zheng, and Mr. Chung Kok Pan, Mr. Yu Si Wing, Mr. Wu Chi Wai, Mr. Frankie Yik would like to speak. 5 minutes each. We're very simple. I'm asking general questions. For the International Convention, is Hong Kong a signatory? Or is it because China is a signatory that we have to follow it? Are we an independent member? Second, according to the convention, I'm not going into the details of each of the objectives. Well, with the International Convention, we need to have local legislation. For the part of local legislation, can we set standards higher or lower than the standards under the convention? Can we deviate from the international standards? I don't think we can be below the international standards, but can we unilaterally set standards higher than the international standards? Or we can't do so, otherwise some vessels dare not come. Ms. Chan, I'd like to thank Mr. Sin for his questions. The IMO in international shipping is a widely recognized body with 170 signatories. China is one of them. Hong Kong is not a signatory, but Hong Kong is a shipping center, and we have many vessels operating in other ports. So our operations must satisfy international standards. Otherwise, when our vessels visit other ports and do not satisfy the international standards, we may be inspected. Our reputation in the world, insofar as compliance is concerned, is very good. In 2012, our inspection rate is 0.85%. When compared with 4.59% internationally, we are very good. So many ports in the world consider our vessels at low risk. Before the IMO set any standards, all signatories will have due discussion and listen to the views of the international shipping industry. So these standards are recognized by all. When our vessels visit other ports, if we don't satisfy those standards, our vessels may be inspected. But even if we are higher than international standards, other vessels may not be interested in coming to Hong Kong to register because they have to satisfy a higher standard. So we're of the view that we should follow the general direction of the IMO and in concurrent pace with international jurisdictions. I understand that policy-wise, the administration will try as far as possible to adhere to the IMO standards. But if we set standards higher for individual vessels as an associate signatory to the convention, as China is a signatory, can I understand more our obligations? I don't quite understand. For WTO, we're an independent tariff entity. For this particular convention, we're not a signatory, but we'll try and follow their standards. China is a signatory. Will all standards then be applicable to Hong Kong? I'd like to thank Mr. Sin for his questions. This convention is applicable to Hong Kong. Of course, before applying the convention to Hong Kong, China will consult Hong Kong. If there are to be amendments, we'll see whether amendments are applicable and suitable to Hong Kong. And China will explain to the IMO whether or not the new standards are appropriate to Hong Kong.
And if we've made clear to IMO that it would be applicable to Hong Kong, then on the legislation and enforcement level, we have to ensure that these requirements are practical in Hong Kong. Yes, I think she has already answered your question. Our standards can be higher than the international requirements, but that may make it impossible for some vessels to fulfill requirements and therefore cannot visit Hong Kong, and that's the implications. Dr. Fernando Cheung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the IMO requirements, according to green groups, we have followed these requirements rather too late. Of course, it is a good thing that we are going to comply with the requirements, but very often pollution is most serious when the vessels are berthed in Hong Kong. So some groups are saying that the sulfur content, they would like berthed vessels in Hong Kong to use fuel of even lower sulfur content. Currently, you talk about 3.5%, but in many places, including those in EU, the requirement is 0.1%. And in some places, it's 0.5%. For instance, the new vessels, cruise just berthed at Hong Kong, it switched its fuel to 0.1% when berthed in Hong Kong, whereas our proposed standard is 3.5% now. You can see that for other cruises, they are already so advanced that they've switched to 0.1% by the time they are berthed. Our requirements are not yet up to international standards. So can we be on equal footing with EU so as to be more stringent in the control of pollution after birth, because you worry that you may deter vessels from visiting Hong Kong, when in fact it's not the case. They're already adopting a high standard than our requirements. Yes, the proposed amendments is to reflect the requirements by IMO that specifies the maximum limit for ocean-going vessels visiting Hong Kong. The requirement is 2.6% currently. Individual states may apply stricter standards in the light of the state of pollution locally. I understand that the EPD has done a lot in this regard. It's planning to legislate to require OGVs to use fuel of lower content level, no higher than 0.5% when berthed in Hong Kong. Our consultation was done in the past few months, and I understand that ship owners and operators are in general supportive of the proposal. And I understand that they are drafting the legislation for introduction to LegCo quite soon. That is on the level of sulfur content of fuel used in Hong Kong. I hope that can be done as soon as possible, because the vessels are berthed in Hong Kong, and I think the pollution or the impact will be much greater than when it's just passing Hong Kong. Mr. Chung Kwok Pan, Para 13. We've got some figures for OGVs in between 2009 and 2012. There have been on average about 700 port state control inspections respective on OGVs in Hong Kong, and the number of inspections is rising. I'd like to know what is the total number of vessels berthed in Hong Kong. For most OGVs, they are able to comply with new standards. But for other vessels, I know we have many river trade vessels in Hong Kong, and I believe their performance may differ from one to another. So do you have any control inspections on them, given that their emission standards are so different? How can you control pollution from these vehicles? Ms. Chen, thank you for your question, Vice Chairman. We had about 5,000 OGVs visiting Hong Kong per year, and we inspected about 800 of them, so that's the rough ratio. As regards enforcement, the Marine Department will, on the basis of local legislation, take enforcement action against visiting OGVs. And none of them have been using fuel exceeding the new proposed content of 3.5%. Most of them are using 0.5%. So most, in general, river vessels can fulfill this, yes. If IMO regulations they can fulfill IMO vessels applicable to them. Well, IMO standards are usually not applicable to locally licensed vessels, but usually we require all vessels in Hong Kong to follow these requirements, including the requirements on sulfur content. Mr. Yu Shiwing, thank you. The cruise terminal will be formally commissioned in October. In fact, the soft opening took place some time ago, and then there will be cruises visiting Hong Kong gradually. For the pollution of greenhouse gases, I'd like to know whether there is any information, because local residents are quite worried about this. I've seen this table, the requirement on emissions from vessels, but there is no mention of greenhouse gases. So I'd like to know whether for cruises the requirements will be different. Thank you. Mr. Yu. The local legislation will have to reflect the latest standards of IMO applicable to elsewhere in the world, and so we will have to take corresponding measures, and it is the EPD's portfolio. I understand that EPD will conduct the technical studies very soon, and the department will see whether there's anything that can be done to address the problem. But as I said, the EPD has already prepared legislation to mandate the sulfur content of fuel used by vessels berthed in Hong Kong. I'm sure that will further improve pollution. What about cruises? Will they be included? Cruises are OGVs, so our legislation will apply to cruises. Cruises are bigger in size, and I think the emission of greenhouse gases should be higher than that of other vessels. So how do you assess their impacts? Well, IMOs have standards to control emission of greenhouse gas, so they have got standards on ship energy efficient management. So the requirements will apply to cruises as well. Have you done any assessment on the impact of cruises on the air quality and temperature of the surroundings? Because these vessels the cruises will be close to residential areas. Well, some new cruises will be visiting Hong Kong for the first time. Will you require cruise companies to provide the relevant information for us, for our information? Yes, we will discuss with the Bureau to see whether we can have more information from cruise operators to see whether other measures are necessary. Yes. Because you are legislating soon, you should consider the issues associated with cruises as well. We don't want to see issues left out after you have legislated. Thank you. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, paragraph 4 of the paper says that we can exempt some local vessels. I'd like to know whether there is any exemption for river trade vessels or vessels applying local waters in the legislation. And paragraph 4 also mentions that the administration is discussing with the Guangdong authorities on the arrangements of ODS, and I'd like to know how is it related to this. Thank you. The IMO makes requirements that are applicable to OGVs. They do not require all party states to introduce those standards. So for local vessels, it depends on their local circumstances. It is not really an exemption requirement. And for NOx Tier 2 level requirements, they are already applicable to OGVs. However, the reduction in emission of NOx or nitrogen oxides is a global trend. And we'll see whether for new vessels we can have similar requirements. We'll see whether their engine can adopt a Tier 2 level emission standards. But of course, in Hong Kong, there are different types of vessels. There are many river trade vessels visiting Hong Kong. There are about 160,000 river trade vessels visiting Hong Kong, and many of these 160,000 trips, many of them were built on the mainland. So when we make requirements on the engines, emission standards of engines of these vessels, we have to take into account this fact. We'll discuss with the main authorities or Guangdong authorities to see whether they have any plans. And according to the Guangdong authorities, they are carrying out technical standards because there are different vessels there. Okay, understood. Is it true that for new vessels, new engines of river trade vessels, they'll be able to comply, but for the old vessels, because they're just plying Hong Kong waters, they will not be subject to the new regime? I'd like to know whether the regulation on river trade vessels would be just the same as OGVs. Now, for emission of nitrogen oxides, even IMO will only require new vessels built after January 2011 to comply with the new requirements. Old vessels are not regulated. So we require newly constructed local vessels to adopt this standard. Or whether we should apply this standard, we will discuss with the Guangdong authorities. As far as you know, how serious is pollution caused by old vessels? Do you have any basic data for us to understand the situation? Because we have to consider low emission zones, and perhaps such things cannot be dealt with under this piece of legislation. If you don't have the information at hand, you can do so afterwards. Yes, we can supply the information after the meeting. But as Mr. Wu said, the proposed amendment to the law is to deal with international standards. It's not for tackling local pollution. Local pollution will be tackled by the EPD, which has various measures. It is now promoting the use of low sulfur content diesel. So please give us the legislative timetable, please. Well, give it the timetable if it is available. If you don't have a timetable, then it can't be helped. Mr. Frederick Yik, well, I have 3 questions. First, para 14, sulfur oxides. According to Ms. Chen, the currently is just 2.6% in Hong Kong. ODS, because it is already banned in Hong Kong, so local vessels is okay. But for river trades, I'd like to seek a clarification.
ODS have to follow the requirement of Annex 6 as well. Are they already in compliance with Annex 6? Will you spot check the non-complying vessels? As for incineration, you said that Hong Kong does not have the equipment on board, but then river trade vessels may have the equipment, but you are of the view that they can do it on land. Even if there's such equipment on board, the authorities have to give approval in accordance with Annex 6. Did you check all river trade vessels to see that they comply with all the requirements? And then on the 1st of January 2015, all vessels will have to change to ultra-low sulfur diesel when they berth at our ports. So will that replace this particular requirement that you are saying here? Ms. Chan, concerning the Environment Bureau's proposal for change of fuel at berthing, there won't be any conflict with the proposal here, because 3.5% will be the highest sulfur content allowed. When berthing is 0.5%, we'll consult government councils, and if necessary, we'll make necessary arrangements under the legislation. But there shouldn't be any conflict. Mr. Chairman, I think you should seek clarification on this. There is a conflict. Cruisers have to switch to ultra-low sulfur diesel when they berth in Hong Kong, but internationally, there's no supply of 0.5% ultra-low sulfur diesel. Before they berth at Hong Kong, they may be using 2.6%. Of course, you may be playing with words, but then theoretically, when cruisers berth, they will not comply with our standards anymore. Would you please clarify this? Ms. Chan? Yes, the honorable member was correct. If a vessel brings in 2.6% diesel, at present it's still lawful. But in future, when the Environment Bureau enacts the new law, then they have to switch to 0.5% when berthing. We'll further consult the DOJ. What about incineration? Yes, 2 more questions. Yes, compliance by river trade vessels. The Marine Department does spot check river trade vessels. I'll defer to my Marine Department's colleagues. Mr. Chairman, perhaps I should explain here that apart from OGVs, we also spot check river trade vessels. For the time being, we've not detected any unlawful activities. They have large chilling equipment and large firefighting equipment on board river trade vessels. So we've not detected any unlawful situations. As for incinerators, the vessels have to satisfy the IMO's specified standard in relation to incineration on board. Up to this moment, we've not detected any non-compliance. As we explained, for incineration of garbage in a port, you have to consider disposal. So when they berth, they won't opt for incineration on board. Yes, it's a matter of pollution. Mr. James Tan, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask something about paragraph 16. It depends on the views of the industry and the administration. The government says that it has consulted 3 committees related to the industry: Shipping Consultative Committee, Local Vessel Advisory Committee, and High-Speed Craft Consultative Committee. Do these 3 committees cover all consultative bodies in Hong Kong? Are OGV representatives also on these committees? As we're on OGVs, have you consulted local vessels as well? Because you're reducing the standard from 4.5 to 3.5, and the international standard for OGVs will be 0.1%. What if local vessels plying Lantau Island or other outlying islands, if they use cleaner fuel, their operational cost may rise and then they may increase the fares? So how does the administration handle local vessels? Ms. Chan? Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the member for the question. Now, these 3 committees will affect the stakeholders, including shipowners registered in Hong Kong and local vessels. High-speed vessels like Hong Kong, Macau vessels, and high-speed vessels plying rivers are all covered. As to how local vessels will be affected, as we are adopting the standard of the IMO, 3.5% is the standard for sulfur contents, and local vessels have already satisfied that standard. At present, using 0.5% already. So local vessels had no comments on these proposed amendments. Mr. Chairman, one more question. If we are to do even better, will that lead to higher costs for both OGVs and local vessels? Well, if you reduce from 4.5% to 3.5%, it may still be all right. But if you further reduce the standard to 0.1%, there may be difficulties. Is that the international standard? In fact, in terms of air pollution and vessel emissions, there are actually 2 aspects. First of all, shifting of fuel at berthing. A 3-year subsidy scheme had started in September 2012. Half of the port facility fees have been reduced to assist vessels to shift to cleaner fuel. That scheme will last till September 2015. This is to allow OGVs to adapt to the new standards. As for local vessels, the EPD had another proposal, that is to tighten the sulfur content of diesel from 0.5% to 0.05%. The EPD did consider oil price in Singapore. The difference was 7 cents per liter. The difference is not big, so the industry should be able to accept it. Well, finally, I'd like to ask a question. I also did some homework. I think almost all OGVs will be able to satisfy the proposed standard because at the moment they're already below 3.5%. At the moment, for some jurisdictions, vessels don't burn any more fuel when they berth. They use land power or shore power. But in Hong Kong, our facilities are not ready. In the Kwai Chung container port, the facility is not perfect yet. So if you propose the use of shore power such that the vessels don't need to operate their engines, it will be even better. In that regard, are there any proposals for the 2 vessel terminals? The cruise terminal, the new cruise terminal, is now operated by the government. What about power supply there? Do you have any idea? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We try to understand the situation with the EPD. Shore power will be provided at the new cruise terminal. A study is underway. When it is completed early next year, they'll see how they can make a further step forward. As for the Kwai Chung container port, it's rather crowded. Whether or not technically shore power can be provided, there may be problems. But of course, ship owners are encouraged to adopt various measures to reduce pollution and to be more environmentally friendly in their commercial activities. It's mentioned just now that no vessel had been found to be breaching the law in our waters. For river trade vessels, some of them suddenly emit serious black smoke. So I have the suspicion whether or not we have spot check enough number of river trade vessels. Do some river trade vessels not change to cleaner fuel when they enter Hong Kong waters? Can you step up your spot check so that we can further improve our air quality, so that we can have more days of blue sky and white clouds? So in terms of inspection, can you step up inspection and inspect more vessels? Mr. Lau, perhaps I should supplement. Concerning emission of black smoke and use of fuel, there are 2 different issues. Black smoke is a result of poor maintenance of the engines. Well, even if you use good fuel, if maintenance is poor, your vessel may still be emitting black smoke. We have a dedicated group of colleagues to enforce laws regulating the emission of black smoke. We can effectively prosecute the vessels concerned. In the past, we only used the expression nuisance. Now we use an actual standard. That is, we use the concentration of black smoke as a yardstick to decide whether or not to prosecute a vessel emitting black smoke. Now, I raise this issue of black smoke because some pollutants are invisible. Some toxic substances are not visible. Some are visible, some are not. So I think you should tackle both. If Hong Kong does well in this regard, every year we'll get more days with a blue sky and white clouds. Finally, I'd like to ask members whether they support the proposed legislative amendments. So thank you very much, the 5 officials attending. Let us now move on to item 5 on the agenda, proposed amendments to legislation relating to the carriage of dangerous goods by air. Please invite the officials to come in. In attendance for this item today, we have the Acting Deputy Secretary for Transport and Housing, Ms. Monica Chen, the Deputy Director General of Civil Aviation, Mr. Coleman Ng, their Assistant Director General, Ms. Priscilla Lam, and their Senior Safety Officer, Ms. Amy Poon. We also have the Assistant Secretary for Transport and Housing, Mr. Desmond Wu. Welcome. Perhaps I should, who will introduce the paper to us? The speaker is off mic. Yes, Ms. Chen. Today, we would like to introduce to members amendments relating to subsidiary legislation to amend the regulations related to carriage of dangerous goods, DGs, by air. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, does amend the regulations and standards every now and then, and we adopt the latest standards through 2 pieces of regulations. That is the Air Navigation Dangerous Goods Regulations and the Dangerous Goods Consignment by Air Safety Regulations. Most proposed amendments are technical in nature. May I defer to Ms. Priscilla Lam of the Civil Aviation Department for elaboration.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and members. I would like to present the proposed amendments to legislation relating to the carriage of dangerous goods by air to you. Well, this is an outline of my presentation. First, I will explain what is meant by dangerous goods and their categories, and then I will explain to you international and local requirements on carriage of dangerous goods by air. The purpose on content of our amendments, and then I will talk about our consultation with the trade in relation to our proposed amendments, and then also talk about the legislative procedures. First, there are different types of dangerous goods, and what are dangerous goods? We refer to the goods that may pose hazards to personal lives and also properties in the course of carriage by air. And according to the ICAO's classification, there are 9 types of dangerous goods. First, they are explosives, such as explosive devices, and second, compressed gas, such as oxygen gas bottles, and third, inflammable liquids, such as perfume, and then inflammable solids, such as matches. And the 5th category is oxides, such as different types of oxides, and then toxic and contaminating substances, such as samples taken from patients and or specimens from samples, and then radioactive substances, such as medical equipment that is radioactive, and then corrosive substances, such as a wet battery, and item 4 others, such as dry ice, and also battery and magnets. You may think that not all of them look dangerous, and why do we classify them as dangerous goods when they are carried by air? Because as we know, the ground conditions are very different from what it is like in the air in terms of the air pressure and temperature. And in the freight section of the plane, there is no air conditioning. And when there is a air current leading to collisions within the cargo carrying section, there may be danger caused by these articles. So what are the requirements internationally in terms of the carriage of dangerous goods by air? Under the UN, there is specially a dedicated organization responsible for aviation, and that's International Civil Aviation Organization. There are 18 annexes to the Convention on International Civil Aviation. Annex 18 deals with the carriage of dangerous goods by air. However, in Annex 18, there are just broad principles and institutional requirements. The more specific requirements are found in technical instruction for the safe transport of dangerous goods by air. The technical instructions, or TI, as a practice, is reviewed once every 2 years. And how can we turn the requirements and the TI into local legislation? In Hong Kong, we have two relevant pieces of legislation. First is the Air Navigation Dangerous Goods Regulations as a Schedule 6 to the Air Navigation Hong Kong Order 1995. It regulates the operations of airlines and the airport regarding dangerous goods. And the second relevant piece of legislation is Dangerous Goods Consignment by Air Safety Regulations, which regulate the shippers and freight forwarders on consigning dangerous goods for air transport. The purpose of the amendments is we want to ensure that our requirements are on par with international requirements. Whenever there is a new TI, we have to review the contents to see how they can be incorporated into the two regulations I mentioned to you. So this exercise is no different. We have considered the new requirements in the TI 2013-14 edition. Well, most of the amendments are textual and technical in nature. However, we have noticed three important areas which we would like to share with you. And they are all related to requirements applicable to airlines. The first area is when an airline has to carry dangerous goods. Of course, in a particular flight, if there is DG, the crew has to be informed. They have to be given information concerning DG. We call it a notice to captain document. There is an item in the document to explain the quantity, the type of DG on board, and also the location it is inside the plane. To help the response team, rescues response team in case of emergencies to act more quickly. The information is required to be supplied to the pilot in command in no case later than when the aircraft moves under its own power, as early as practicable after departure of the aircraft. And then relevant information has to be provided to the ground crew, so that both parties can receive the same information as soon as possible, with to ensure that the ground crew can have access to such information at once. And another important amendment is when DG is consigned to an airline, a set of documents has to be provided to set out all relevant information of the DG in question. And the airline is required to retain a copy of the documentation for 6 months. The new requirements would require airlines to retain a copy of the documentation of a DG which it has refused to carry for no less than 6 months. It will help relevant authorities to understand why a particular DG is always rejected by airlines, and why some companies are always rejected by some airlines when they would like to consign a DG by air. And such information will help us in enhancing training of air cargo industry personnel. And the last important amendment is related to operation of helicopters. To enhance the safety of carriage of DG by helicopters, helicopter operators are required to take into consideration the type of packaging used, and the protection of the packaging from adverse weather, and also the dangers of static discharge upon landing or release of the loads when they receive a particular consignment. Same as before, when we receive such recommendations, we will consider the impact or implications to stakeholders, and then we will consult the stakeholders duly. So for the proposed amendments, we have consulted the Board of Airline Representatives, the 2 Hong Kong commercial helicopter operators, the Government Flying Service, and the Technical Subcommittee of the Aviation Development Advisory Committee. They are all supportive of the proposed amendments. And lastly, the legislative timetable. Similar to other legislative amendments of subsidiary legislation, we will submit the relevant regulations to the CN Council, and then the amendments will be introduced to LegCo for approval through the negative vetting process in the 4th quarter of this year. So information of DG will be submitted to the flight operators or any operators on work. They will take effect on the 1st of January 2014. For the other proposals, they will take effect as soon as they are passed by LegCo. So I end my presentation here. We appeal to members to support our proposed amendments. Thank you, Mr. Lam. All right, questions. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, Mr. Frederick Yik. Any others? Mr. Yu Xiwing, 5 minutes each. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, it's just a general question. We an independent member of the ICAO, or are we just an associate member because of the fact that China is a signatory? Please explain. And secondly, Although the amendments have the support of some important stakeholders, I'd like to know whether we have normal communications with overseas airlines, and do they have any response or comments on the proposed amendments? Ms. Chen, thank you. Our involvement with ICAO, well, all contracting states have to be sovereign states. So we're involved because we're part of China. We are a member of the Chinese delegation in meetings of ICAO. Mr. Sin Chung referred to other overseas airlines. When ICAO discussed the amendments, the International Air Transport Association, or IATA, was involved in the discussion, and they gave a lot of suggestions to ICAO in a very positive manner. So views of IATA have been included. As regards our liaison with overseas airlines, perhaps my colleague, Mr. Ng, can supplement. Mr. Ng, thank you. Overseas airlines, if they have to carry DG in and out of Hong Kong, they have to seek approval first, and we have to ensure that they comply with the requirements of TIs under ICAO before approval will be given. Thank you. Mr. Yik Chi Ming. Thank you. Mr. Lam of the Civil Aviation Department gave a very clear presentation, and I think the amendments about procedures. Regarding the 9 categories of DGs, mercury, which category does mercury fall under? It's item type 8, corrosives. Yes, corrosives. So it should be subject to regulation. Indeed. Thank you. Mr. Ng?
Yes, it's correct. Mercury is corrosive in nature. Besides, it's particularly dangerous to aircraft because mercury is heavy and is liquid. If it flows out, it can infiltrate any gap in the aircraft, leading to metal corrosion, and that is very difficult to clear. Therefore, it can pose very serious hazard to an aircraft. So it's Group 8. Mr. Yu Si-wing, for these 9 categories, will you further categorize them into high-risk substances and low-risk substances? For high-risk DGs, can they be consigned on aircraft which carry many passengers? And then in paragraph 9, it is said that if DGs cannot be detected but later detected by other civil aviation jurisdictions, notification has to be made. Last year, did the SARG receive any such notification? And with such notifications, was there any subsequent improvement? And last year, were any passengers prosecuted by the authorities as a result of this? And which category of prosecution that was? Ms. Lam? There are 9 categories of DGs, further subdivided in accordance with their severity. For the very serious DGs, they are banned from freight aircraft and passenger aircraft. And DGs can only be stored in the storage cabin of an aircraft. In fact, in the past few years, the situation has been improving. Every now and then we receive reports that there undeclared DGs on board aircraft, but in Hong Kong we have very few such cases. Mr. Chung Kok Pan, well, sorry, Mr. Yu Si-wing. Mr. Chairman, if we fail to detect DGs on board an aircraft, and then other jurisdictions detect the presence of those DGs, I'd like to know whether we frequently had those situations last year. Offhand, I don't have the information, but last year we had very few such cases. Were there any occurrences? Yes, but just a few cases. Any prosecution? That is prosecution as a result of carrying DGs. Well, passengers may not be Hong Kong residents. They just bought in Hong Kong. So we cannot apply our laws to non-Hong Kong residents. My third question is, did any passenger carry DGs with him and was detected? Say explosives? Were there any such prosecutions? Usually, DGs detected on passengers are perfume, hair, beauty substances, etc. that exceed the volume specified. On very few occasions were explosives discovered. And in fact, the very normal DGs detected can be kept in the airport for 14 days and be claimed back later by the passengers concerned. Mr. Chung Kok Pan. Now, these 9 categories of DGs are for passenger aircraft. Say, perfume, if it does not exceed a certain volume, it can be consigned on board. Is that correct? Well, according to the severity of the DGs concerned, these 9 categories are subdivided into smaller categories. If suitably handled, a certain amount of DGs not exceeding the specified volume can be carried on board. Well, in a big aircraft, there can be hundreds of passengers. If many of them carry DGs, the aggregate amount may be dangerous. Well, let me answer this. Although we call DGs, if they are appropriately packaged and consigned on board an aircraft, they can absolutely be transported safely. As for normal passengers, they usually carry very small quantities with them. If they can pass clearance, it should be safe. If customs officials discover substances like lithium batteries which cannot be carried on board, such substances will be confiscated. And later, the passengers concerned can claim back the substances from the airlines concerned. But such substances cannot be carried on board. We don't differentiate between freight aircraft and passenger aircraft in this regard. Because even on passenger aircraft, there may be a lot of cargoes. We have to collect information on the location and quantity of DGs on board an aircraft. If an aircraft has an accident, the ground crew and government authorities had to know how to handle such DGs. That's why before the starting of the engine, the pilot in command has to receive information related to DGs on board, such that in an emergency, he already has the information in hand. Just now, you mentioned DGs that cannot be carried on board. But for checked-in luggage, if different passengers carry different DGs with them that are checked in, the Customs and Excise Department won't be able to detect them. Well, usually, if substances are allowed on board, they should be up to standard. Say, if you dismantle a packet of lithium batteries and carry them on board, is unsafe. But if you only carry one lithium battery with you, you are allowed to take that lithium battery with you. For liquid substances that can be hand-carried on board, usually only one piece per passenger is allowed. Let me repeat, although we call DGs, if they are packaged appropriately, labeled correctly, and stored correctly, they're absolutely safe in terms of aviation. Finally, Mr. Albert Chan. Well, Mr. Chairman, a simple question. Many passengers, particularly young passengers who carry backpacks with them, they may have aerosol containers for camping or other purposes. According to the definition, such substances should be defined as DGs. Well, when such passengers go on board, will such substances be confiscated? For hand-carried luggages, there is this 100 cc threshold. Mr. Chairman, generally speaking, compressed liquid cannot be hand-carried on board because such substances may pose hazards to an aircraft. So, at clearance, such goods should have been confiscated already. What about inflammable substances or equipment? Well, when you're elsewhere in the world, you may not be able to find such aerosol substances anymore. So that's the set standard throughout the world, isn't it? It cannot be changed? That's correct. We won't consider the explanation that if you don't carry compressed liquid or gas on board, you cannot use it. We won't accept that sort of explanation. Is that the case throughout the world? Insofar as regulation of DGs is concerned throughout the world, that is the threshold. Such substances are banned on aircraft. Can you clarify what I said about the 100 cc threshold? Of course, banned goods cannot be carried on board. Hairspray, etc., can be hand-carried on board, subject to a certain quantity. I mentioned 100 cc. Can you confirm that threshold? Mr. Chairman, you're correct. If a passenger needs to hand-carry a small quantity of such liquid substances or gaseous substances on board, the aggregate quantity should not exceed 100 cc. They should be packaged in a transparent plastic bag that can be shown to our customs officials. What about compressed liquid or gas for cooking? It's impossible for that to fall below 100 cc. Well, I think the administration has already explained very clearly that prohibited goods are absolutely banned for hand carrying on board. As for permitted DGs, the threshold is 100 cc. Now, I support the proposed legislations, but I'd like to ask a question. Ms. Lam mentioned and the DG repeated that before taxing the information should be given to the pilot in command. Why before taxiing? Because all doors of the aircraft will have been closed already. That is, once taxiing starts, all preparation will have been completed already. Is that international language? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, in simple terms, that's international language. We have to define what's meant by navigation. That is, the aircraft has to use its own power to mobilize it. That is, no towing equipment is needed. This is already an improved definition. That is, what's meant by takeoff for an aircraft from an airport. From starting the engine to going on to the runway to actually take off, there's a period of time. So now the definition is an aircraft has started its engine and used its engine to mobilize itself rather than relying on any towing equipment. Then we'll define the aircraft as having taken off. So before that, the pilot in command has to be informed. I'd like to ask members whether they support the proposed legislative amendments. All right, accepted. So thank you very much, the 5 officials, for attending the meeting. Next, any other business? Any other business? No? Date of the next meeting, the 22nd of July. We'll start at 9 a.m. on that day.